My name is Maren Holloway. I'm 33. 3 days before my wedding, my future mother-in-law sat across from me at a marble kitchen island, set down a coffee cup that had cost more than my mother's monthly grocery budget, and told me my parents simply would not fit the aesthetic. She said it the way other people order salad. No apology, no softening. Just a sentence delivered between bites of a scone she had not offered me. And the worst part, the part I am still ashamed to admit, is that for the first 6 seconds, I tried to figure out how to make it work for her. I had been paying for half of that wedding, $18,000 of my own money. I had spent 4 months turning myself into the kind of bride her garden club friends would approve of. And the only I asked in return was that my mother and father, who had cleaned other people's houses for 30 years so I could go to law school, be allowed to sit in the front row of their only daughter's wedding. And in that kitchen, with peonies in a vase between us, she told me no. This is the story of what I did next, of the contract I had drafted myself and forgotten I controlled. Of the wooden spoon she handed me the first Thanksgiving I called her family, and of the night I finally stopped trying to earn a chair at a table that was never built to seat me. If you have ever made yourself smaller so the people you love could feel bigger, stay with me, I see you. This one is for you. Welcome to Hidden Family Revenge. If stories like mine find you, you already know what to do. Let me take you back. 2 years earlier, a different kitchen, a different season. The first Thanksgiving I ever spent at the Albright house in Ashford, Connecticut. Soren, the man I was going to marry, had been nervous about the introduction for weeks. He kept warning me about his mother in this careful, sideways way men learn to do when they love a difficult woman. He said things like, she means well. He said things like, she just has standards. And I listened, and I nodded, and I bought a new dress. And I practiced shaking hands in a mirror like a person preparing for a deposition. What I remember most clearly is that Constance, that was her name, Constance Albright, and you'll hear that name a lot, pulled me into the kitchen after dinner. She handed me a wooden spoon. The handle was worn smooth and dark in the middle, where decades of hands had held it. She said it had belonged to her mother. She said her mother had used it to make gravy every Thanksgiving for 41 years. And then she said, you stir the gravy the way she stirred it, slow, like you have all the time in the world. I was 29. I had never been given a family heirloom in my life. I cried in her downstairs bathroom for 6 minutes and then washed my face and went back out and ate pumpkin pie and laughed at her husband's terrible jokes and let myself, for the first time, believe that I had been chosen. I want you to remember that spoon. We're going to come back to it. My parents are Walter and Ruth Holloway. They live in the house I grew up in, a small ranch with green shutters on Maple Lane, 2 streets back from the high school, where my father coached freshman baseball for 26 years without ever being paid for the time. My mother cleaned 3 houses on Tuesdays, 2 houses on Thursdays, and the Methodist church every other Saturday, for as long as I can remember. They are not loud people. They are not impressive at first glance. They are the kind of people who, if you sat next to them on a bus, you would not look up from your phone. They are also the 2 best people I have ever met in my life. My father has a line he likes to say, and he says it the same way every time, with his coffee cup tilted slightly toward whoever he is talking to. He says, a wedding is a one-day promise, Maren. A family is a 30-year one. For most of my engagement, I thought he was talking about me and Soren. I had no idea he was warning me. The first warning sign came in February. Constance called me to ask if I would handle the boring parts of the wedding because I was so good with paperwork. Those were her exact words. I want you to hear them again. So good with paperwork. The way you say it to a child who is good at coloring inside the lines. I was a senior associate at a boutique estate and trust firm in Hartford. I had spent 4 years drafting contracts that moved more money in a single signature than her husband's dental practice would see in a decade. And she handed me the venue agreement the way other women hand out napkins. I didn't correct her. I should have. That was the first version of myself I was already starting to disappear. I said yes because saying yes was easier than explaining why the word boring was the wrong word. I took the contract, I read it. I noticed, the way lawyers notice things without meaning to, that the deposit account was structured in my name as the binding signatory, with the Albrights named only as contributing parties. It was a tax-efficient setup their accountant had recommended. They thought it was a courtesy to let me sign. I knew, even as I initialed it, that what they had actually done was hand me the key to the entire wedding. I tucked that thought into a quiet corner of my brain and did not think about it again for 4 months. The second warning sign came in March. Constance threw a small engagement party at the country club in Ashford. My parents drove 40 minutes to attend. My father in the navy suit he wears to funerals and important Sundays. My mother in a dress she had bought at a consignment shop for $31 and altered herself. They arrived early. They always arrive early. It is one of the things I love most about them. And when they walked in, Constance was at the bar with a woman named Mrs. Tilden, who I later learned was the chair of the Garden Club's spring fundraiser, and Constance turned to her and said, in a voice that was meant to be quiet but was not quiet enough, "Oh, that's just the bride's people." They drove in from town, the bride's people, like we were a delivery, like my parents were a vendor she had not yet decided to tip. My mother heard it. I know she heard it, because her left hand moved to her right wrist the way it does when she is trying to talk herself out of saying something. She squeezed her own pulse for 3 seconds and then she let go and smiled at me across the room and mouthed the words, "You look beautiful." I went to the bathroom and stood with my palms on the cold marble counter and told myself I was overthinking it. I told myself maybe she had meant it differently. I told myself 100 things that night that I should not have told myself, and every one of them was a brick in a wall I was building between me and the people who actually loved me. That is the part I want you to understand before we go any further. The villain in this story is not a monster. She is a woman who learned early that being ordinary was the worst thing a person could be, and she spent 58 years arranging the world around her so that she would never have to feel ordinary again. My parents, kind, quiet, working class, were a threat to that arrangement. Not because they did anything, because they existed. Because their existence reminded her that the line between her and the people she had spent a lifetime looking down on was thinner than she could bear. By April, the wedding had grown. I want to be precise about this, because the numbers matter. The original budget Soren and I had agreed on, in his apartment in Hartford, sitting on the floor with takeout containers between us, was $22,000. We were going to do it at the Old Stone Inn on Route 7, the one with the river behind it. 80 guests. Family still dinner. A folk band I had loved since college. 22,000. I had saved 11 of it. Soren had saved 11 of it. We were even. We were happy. Then Constance got involved. She said the Stone Inn was charming, but charming was the wrong word for a wedding. She said charming was for picnics. She said her son was going to be married properly. By the end of April, the venue had been moved to a private estate on the coast. The caterer was a woman with a French name and a 6-month wait list. The florist was flown in from a city I had only seen in magazines, and the budget had quietly inflated to $36,000. When I asked Soren how we were going to handle the difference, not Soren, Constance answered. She said, "We'll all just split it down the middle." Then she smiled and she said, "Family is family." $18,000 from me, from the daughter of a baseball coach and a house cleaner, from a woman whose parents had not been asked, not consulted, not even informed that the wedding had tripled in scope. Should have said no. I want you to know that I know that. I should have said the Stone Inn or nothing. I should have said my 11,000 or nothing. Instead, I went into my savings account, the one I had been building since I was 23 for the down payment on a house, and I moved the money. I did it on a Sunday morning. I did it before I had finished my coffee. I did it because I had already started to believe, without ever saying it out loud, that this was the price of admission. This was what it costs to belong to people like the Albrights, and I was so used to paying for things by then that I did not stop to ask if the admission was even real. In May, my mother asked if she could help with anything. Just one thing. She wanted to know if she could make the boutonnieres. She had a friend at the church who grew sweet peas, and she thought sweet peas would be pretty, and she had already practiced making one on a paper towel at the kitchen table. I told Constance. Constance laughed, not a mean laugh, a worse laugh, a small, indulgent laugh, the kind you give a child who has offered to fix your car. She said, "Oh, that's so sweet of her. But we already have a florist." Then she put her hand on my arm and she said, "You'll tell her gently, won't you, Marin? I don't want her to feel bad." I told her gently. I told my own mother gently that she was not needed for the only thing she had asked to do. My mother nodded. She said, "Of course, sweetheart, that makes sense." And then she went home and made 42 boutonnieres anyway. She put them in her freezer in a Tupperware container so they would keep. She never told me. I found out 2 days before the wedding. We'll get there. The third warning sign came in June. I overheard Constance on the phone with her sister. I had walked into the house to drop off a sample of the invitation cardstock. The front door was open. Her voice carried. She was in the sunroom. She did not know I was there. She said, "Oh, you'll see them at the wedding, the parents. Well, you'll see. We did what we could with the seating chart." And then she laughed, and her sister laughed. And I stood in the entryway with the cardstock in my hand, and I did the thing I had been doing for months. I told myself I had heard it wrong. I told myself she might have meant something else. I told myself we did what we could with the seating chart could be a sentence about anything. I left the cardstock on the entry table and I drove home, and I did not say a word to Soren, not one. I want to stop here, because if you have ever stood in a doorway and heard yourself described by someone who was supposed to love you, drop the word "heard" in the comments. And if you have ever talked yourself out of believing what you just heard, drop the word twice. Because what happened next is the part I cannot unhear. It was Saturday, the first Saturday in July. 3 days before the wedding. I had driven up to Ash and Ashford in the morning to do a final walkthrough of the estate with Bet Marlowe, the wedding planner Constance had hired. Bet was 61 years old, sharp as a paring knife, and she had been planning Connecticut weddings since before I was born. She did not gossip. She did not flatter. She had said maybe 50 words to me in 8 months, and every one of them had landed exactly where she meant it to land. I trusted her in the quiet way you trust a doctor, who never oversells you on a treatment. After the walkthrough, Constance asked me to come back to the house for coffee. She said it like it was a thank you. She said it like we were friends. The kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon, and the faint chemical sweetness of a candle that had been burning too long. The peonies on the island were the size of small cabbages. I sat down on the stool she pointed to. She poured me a cup of coffee. She did not pour one for herself. I should have noticed that. She said, "Marin, I want to talk to you about Sunday." I said, "Okay." She said, "I've been thinking about the guest list and the seating chart. And I think it would be best for the flow of the day if your parents were not there. I want to tell you that the room tilted, but it did not. The room stayed perfectly still. The peonies stayed perfectly pink. Outside, somewhere, a lawnmower was running. I could hear it. I could feel the coffee cup against my hand, hot through the porcelain. I could feel the seam of my own jeans against the back of my knee. I could feel everything except my own face. I said, "I don't understand." She said, "Honey, look. We've spent a great deal of money on this wedding. The Tildens are going to be there. The Brunswicks are going to be there. Pastor Hollis is going to be there. And your parents, Walter and Ruth, they're lovely. They're very sweet people. But they simply won't fit the aesthetic." She said the aesthetic. The way you would describe a color of paint that didn't match a sofa. I did not yell. I did not cry. I want you to understand that this is not because I am strong. This is because I am a lawyer, and lawyers learn very early that the worst thing you can do in a room you are losing is raise your voice. I set the coffee cup down. I asked her in the same tone I used to ask opposing counsel for a continuance if Soren knew. She said, "Soren agrees with me. That was the lie." I knew it was a lie the second she said it, because Soren had texted me at 6:43 that morning a photograph of his coffee maker with a sad face and the words, "She made me drink tea." But it didn't matter that it was a lie. What mattered was that she had said it, out loud, in her own kitchen, with Mrs. Tilden, who I now realized had been in the dining room the whole time, pretending to look at a centerpiece sample, listening to every word. Every part of me wanted to throw the coffee cup at the wall. Every part of me wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her sunroom and her garden club and her aesthetic. I didn't. I picked up my purse. I stood up. I said, "Thank you for the coffee, Constance." I walked to my car. I drove 3 miles. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder of Route 7. I put the car in park. I put my hands on the steering wheel, and I sat there for 41 minutes without moving. The gravel shifted under the tires when a truck went by. Somewhere behind me, a screen door slammed. My hands did not shake. That, more than anything else, is what scared me. My hands did not shake. I drove home. I did not call Soren. I did not call my mother. I went into my home office, the small room off the kitchen, with the wide oak desk my father had built me when I passed the bar. And I sat down at my computer, and I opened the venue contract. The one Constance had handed me in February, the one I had filed and forgotten. I read it for the first time. I not the lawyer. The deposit account was in my name, mine. $26,000 of the $36,000 had already been transferred into it. My 18, plus the Albrights 8 that they had paid early, plus the catering retainer that Soren and I had split. The contract had a cancellation clause, a standard one. 72-hour notice required, written, signed by the binding signatory. The binding signatory was Marin E. Holloway. There was no second signature line. There never had been. Constance had handed me a leash and then forgotten she was holding the other end. I sat in that chair and I looked at that contract for a long time. I want to tell you I made the decision then. I didn't. I closed the laptop. I made a sandwich. I ate it standing up at the counter. I called my mother and I asked her how her day had been, and she told me about a robin that had built a nest in the gutter and about a casserole she was making for a sick neighbor. And I listened to her voice and I felt something in my chest that I had not felt in 8 months. I felt found. I did not tell her. I did not tell her anything. I told her I loved her and I hung up. That night Soren came home. He had been at his parents' all afternoon. He walked in and he kissed me and he asked me what I wanted for dinner, and I looked at him and I said, "Did your mother tell you what she said today?" His face went white. I want you to know that. His face went white. So he had known something was coming. He just hadn't known what. I told him. Every word. The aesthetic, the Tildens, the seating chart. The lie about him agreeing. I watched his face the whole time. I watched it move through 4 or 5 different emotions before it landed on the one I had been afraid of. Exhaustion. Not anger. Exhaustion. The exhaustion of a 35-year-old man who has spent his entire life negotiating with his mother. He sat down at the kitchen table. He put his head in his hands. He said, "I'll talk to her." I said, "Soren, I don't need you to talk to her. I need you to stand next to me." He said, "Marin, she's my mother." And there it was. The sentence I had been waiting 8 months to hear him say out loud. She's my mother, as if that explained anything. As if that explained why my mother, who had cleaned other people's bathrooms so I could go to college, was now sitting at her own kitchen table in Maple Lane, not knowing that the wedding she had been counting down to for 9 months had just been quietly canceled in a sunroom 40 miles away. I went to bed at 10:30. I did not sleep. At 2:14 in the morning, I got up. I went into my office. I opened my laptop. And I want to tell you the truth about this, because if I don't, the rest of the story isn't honest. I opened my email. I started a message to Constance. I wrote, "Constance, I think we got off on the wrong foot today. I want to apologize for my reaction. I understand the pressures of the day, and I want us to find a way to make this work for everyone." I stared at it. I read it 8 times. I added a sentence about Sunday's weather. I added a sentence about how much I appreciated everything she had done. I moved a comma. I changed apologize to say I'm sorry, and then I changed it back. I did not send it. I want you to know how close I came. The cursor was on the send button, my finger was on the trackpad, and then I caught my own reflection in the black screen behind the email window. A 33-year-old woman in a robe she had owned since law school, with the lamplight catching the side of her face, apologizing to the woman who had just told her her parents did not fit the aesthetic. And I did not know who that woman was. I genuinely did not. I sat there and I looked at her, and I thought, very clearly, in a voice that did not sound like mine, this is the woman she wants. And if you send that email, this is the woman you are going to be for the next 40 years. I closed the laptop. I did not send it. I did not delete it either. I left it sitting in the drafts folder. I think it is still there. I think I left it there on purpose, as a reminder, as a piece of evidence I might need someday about who I almost became. I made coffee at 3 in the morning. I drank it standing at the kitchen window. The street outside was empty. There was a single porch light on at the house across the way. I thought about my father's line. A wedding is a one-day promise. A family is a 30-year one. I had been so focused on the one-day promise that I had forgotten what it was supposed to be a promise of. A wedding is a promise of a family. And a family does not uninvite your parents from the only day they will ever be the parents of the bride. I sat down at the kitchen table at 4 in the morning. I made a list. Lawyers make lists. It is how we metabolize feeling. I wrote at the top of a yellow legal pad what I can live with, and then I wrote 2 columns under it. The left column was longer than the right. The left column had things like the Tildons disliking me, the garden club whispering, Soren being uncomfortable for 6 months. The right column had only one thing on it, just one. I wrote my mother, sitting alone in a kitchen on Maple Lane on the day her only daughter gets married. That is what I cannot live with. I circled it 3 times, then I put the pen down, and I went to bed, and I slept at 4 straight for the first time in 3 weeks. The next morning was Sunday. The wedding was Tuesday. I drove to my office in Hartford. I knew the building would be empty. I let myself in with my key card. I went up to the 4th floor. I sat at my own desk. I opened the venue contract on my own screen. I printed 2 copies. I put them in a manila folder. I drove to Ashford. And I sat down in my parents' kitchen at 10:45 in the morning, with my mother making French toast and my father reading the local paper and a robin chirping somewhere outside the window. And I told them everything. I want to tell you, my mother cried. She did not. She listened. She listens the way she has listened to me every important time in my life, with her hands folded on the table and her eyes on my face and her mouth slightly open like she is ready to laugh if I need her to. When I finished, she did not say anything for almost a full minute. My father put down the paper. He took off his reading glasses. He folded them carefully and set them on top of the paper. And then he looked at me and he said, Marin, what do you want to do? Not what should you do, not what's the right thing. What do you want to do? I want you to understand the gift of that question. I had not been asked what I wanted in 8 months. I said, I want to cancel the wedding. My father nodded once. My mother reached across the table and put her hand on top of mine. She said, okay, sweetheart. She said it the same way she used to say it when I came home with a skinned knee. Okay, sweetheart, we'll figure it out. I drove back to Hartford. I called Bette Marlowe from the car. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Marin, I have something to tell you. I should have told you weeks ago. Can I come to your office tomorrow morning? I said yes. I did not ask her what it was. I did not need to. I already knew, in the way you know the shape of something before you turn the light on. That night I called Soren. I told him I needed 24 hours. I told him not to call me. I told him not to come to my apartment. I told him I loved him because I did, and because love and good judgment are not the same thing, and a grown woman has to be able to hold both at the same time. He did not argue. I think he was relieved. I think he had been waiting for me to be the one to say it, because he had spent 35 years being a man who could not say no to his mother, and he was not going to learn how to in the next 36 hours. Monday morning, 8 a.m., Bette walked into my office. She was wearing a navy blazer and carrying a folder. She put the folder on my desk. She sat down. She said, Constance asked me 3 weeks ago to draft a second seating chart. One without your parents. She told me she was going to handle it with you closer to the date. I told her I would not draft it. She drafted it herself. I made a copy because I did not trust her. Here it is. I opened the folder. There it was. Table 3, Table 4, Table 5. No Walter Holloway. No Ruth Holloway. Their names did not exist on the document. 3 weeks. She had been planning to uninvite my parents for 3 weeks. She had let me write checks. She had let me approve menus. She had let me try on my wedding dress in her sunroom while she pinned the hem. And the whole time, she had been planning to erase the 2 people who had paid for the dress with 30 years of mopping other people's floors. I closed the folder. I looked at Bette. I said, thank you. She said, what do you want to do? The same question. From a woman I had known for 8 months. The same question my father had asked me 23 hours earlier. And I realized, sitting there in my office on a Monday morning in July, that the only people in my life who had ever asked me that question were the people who had never once asked me for anything else. I said, I'm going to cancel the venue today, and I want you to be the one to tell Constance. Bette smiled. It was the only time I had ever seen her smile with her whole face. She said it would be my pleasure. At 11 o'clock, I signed the cancellation form. I scanned it. I emailed it to the venue. The venue confirmed at 11:14. At 11:16, the entire deposit account froze pending refund processing. At 11:20, the caterer's office sent me a confirmation that they would not be billing the remaining balance as the event had been canceled within the contractual window. At 11:26, the florist's assistant called to ask if there had been a misunderstanding. I told her there had not been. I told her to keep the deposit. I told her to give the flowers to a hospice. She said, okay, in a small voice, and she hung up. At 11:41, my phone rang. Constance. I let it go to voicemail. She called back at 11:42, and 11:43, and 11:45. I waited until 12:15. I called her back. I had a glass of water on my desk. I had the contract in front of me. I had the second seating chart next to it. I had my father's voice in my head. She answered on the first ring. She said, Marin, there has been a mistake. The venue is saying the wedding has been canceled. Obviously, that is not correct. I need you to call them and fix it. I said, Constance, there is no mistake. I canceled it this morning. There was a silence. I want to describe this silence to you because it was the first time in 8 months that Constance Albright had been silent. It lasted 9 seconds. I counted. I am a lawyer. I count silences. 9 seconds. And then she said, you can't do that. I said, I already did. The contract is in my name. I am the binding signatory. The deposit is being refunded to my account. The caterer has been released. The florist has been released. The estate has been released. There is no wedding on Tuesday, Constance. There is no wedding. She said, Marin, listen to me. We can fix this. I will call your parents myself. I will personally drive over there and invite them. We can, I said. Constance, my father has a line he likes to use. He says a wedding is a one-day promise, but a family is a 30-year one. I'm not canceling a wedding. I'm canceling a 30-year promise. To you, to this family. I will not raise children who will be told someday that their grandparents did not fit the aesthetic. I will not. I want to tell you, she cried. She did not. I want to tell you, she apologized. She did not. What she did was the thing I will remember for the rest of my life. She said very quietly, in a voice that was not the voice she used at the garden club. What about Soren? And I said, I love Soren, I do, but I am not marrying Soren on Tuesday. I am not marrying a man who needs his mother's permission to defend his wife. If Soren and I get married someday, it will be on a Tuesday no one knew about, at a courthouse with my parents in the front row. You will not be invited, not because I am punishing you, because you have already shown me, very clearly, what kind of grandmother you would be, and I will not put my children in a room with that. She hung up on me. She actually hung up on me. I have never been so grateful for an act of rudeness in my life, because if she had stayed on the line, I might have softened. I might have apologized. I might have offered her some small olive branch she did not deserve. Instead, she hung up. And I sat in my office and I closed my eyes and I felt, for the first time in 8 months, like I was inside my own body. The phone rang 4 more times in the next 2 hours. I let everyone go to voicemail. The first was Gerald Albright, Soren's father. He left a message that started with the word Marin and ended 2 minutes later with the words, you ungrateful little, and a clatter that I think was the phone being thrown. The second was Laurel Albright, Soren's younger sister. I want to come back to her in a moment. The third was Mrs. Tilden, somehow. I did not know she had my number. She did not leave a message. The fourth was Soren. I listened to his message. He was crying. He said, Marin, I just got off the phone with my mother. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I want to tell you I called him back that day. I did not. I called him back 3 days later. We met at a diner in Hartford. He had not shaved. He told me he had moved out of his parents' house and was staying with a friend. He told me he had finally said the words to his mother that he should have said years ago. He told me he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again. He told me he loved me. I told him I loved him too. I told him that love was not enough. I told him that the man I had been engaged to and the man sitting across from me at that diner might be the same man eventually, but they were not the same man yet. I told him I needed him to figure out who he was without his mother in the room, and I could not be in the room while he figured it out. He nodded. He cried. He paid for the coffee. He hugged me on the sidewalk for a long time. We have not spoken since. That was 11 months ago. I think about him sometimes. I do not regret what I did. Laurel's voicemail was different. I want to tell you about it. Laurel was 28. She had spent her entire life being the quiet daughter, the one who never made waves, the one who laughed at her mother's jokes and stayed out of the line of fire. She left me a voicemail that afternoon that was 47 seconds long. She said, Marin, I heard. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I've watched her do this my whole life, to people, to my friends, to my college roommate, to me sometimes. And I never said anything. I went along because it was easier. And I think I have been a coward for a long time. And I am sorry. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see what she did. And I am sorry I never said anything before. I listened to that voicemail 5 times. I cried during the third one. I have never deleted it. It is still on my phone. Laurel and I are not friends now. We do not text, we do not call. But every Christmas, she sends me a card. The cards are not signed. They are just blank, with a photograph of a snowy field on the front. I know they are from her because of the postmark. Ashford, Connecticut. I keep everyone. They are in a small wooden box in my closet. The story does not have a movie ending. I want to be honest about that. There was no dramatic confrontation at a rehearsal dinner. There was no slow clap. There was no moment where Constance Albright stood up in a church and admitted what she had done. What happened was quieter and slower and in some ways harder. What happened was that I went home. I drove to Maple Lane on the Tuesday that was supposed to be my wedding. I got there at 11 in the morning. My mother had set the kitchen table for 3. She had made French toast again, because she remembered I had liked it on Sunday. My father had bought a bouquet of grocery store flowers and put them in a mason jar in the middle of the table. There were 3 plates, not 4, 3, for me, for mother, for my father, and it was, I want you to understand this, the most beautiful table I had ever sat down at in my life. I stayed there for 2 weeks. I slept in my childhood bedroom. I helped my mother weed the back garden. I helped my father re-stain the fence. I cried on a Wednesday afternoon while folding laundry, and my mother stood in the doorway and did not say anything. She just stayed. She stayed for as long as I needed her to stay. That is what mothers do. Real mothers. Not the kind who hand you a wooden spoon and call it love. I want to tell you about the spoon. The wooden spoon. The one Constance had given me at that first Thanksgiving. I had kept it in the kitchen drawer in my apartment for 2 years. The Sunday after I came back from Maple Lane, I took it out. I held it in my hand. I felt the worn, smooth part of the handle. I thought about what it had meant to me when she gave it to me. I thought about what it had actually meant to her. I think, in the end, she gave it to me because she wanted to see if I would treat it like an heirloom or like a tool. I think she wanted to see if I would polish it and put it on a shelf. I think she wanted to see if I could be made into the kind of woman who polishes things and puts them on shelves. I am not. I never was. I took the spoon out into the alley behind my apartment building. I broke it in half over my knee. It was harder to break than I expected. I had to put weight into it. I threw both halves in the dumpster. And then I went back upstairs and I made gravy for dinner with a metal whisk, and it was the best gravy I had ever made in my life. The Albrights tried to reach me in different ways over the following months. Constance sent a card in October. It was a sympathy card, of all things. There was no sympathy needed. There had been no death. I think she had run out of other kinds of cards. Inside, she had written one sentence. She had written, I hope someday you will understand the position you put us in. That was the sentence, the position you put us in. Not the position they had put themselves in. Not the position they had put me in. The position I had put them in. By canceling the wedding they had ruined, I did not respond. I burned the card in the kitchen sink. It was a small, satisfying fire. Gerald never reached out. I do not expect he ever will. Some men are not built for apology. They are built for the kind of permanent baffled offense that mistakes itself for dignity. Laurel, as I said, sends the cards. The cards are enough. I do not need more from her. Soren, I told you. 11 months. He sent me a long letter in March. I read it twice. I put it in the drawer with the cards. I have not written him back. I think someday I might. I think someday I might not. I am 33 years old, and I am learning for the first time in my life that not every door needs to be closed and not every door needs to be opened. Some doors you just leave the way they are. Some doors you walk past every day on your way to the rest of your life. What did I learn? I want to be careful with this part because the only thing I hate more than a story without a lesson is a story that tries to teach you one. So I will only tell you what I learned. I am not to tell you what you should learn. That is up to you. I learned that I had spent my whole adult life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for me. I had been trying to earn it with my degree, with my checkbook, with my silence, with my patience. And the harder I tried to earn it, the smaller the chair got, and the further from the center of the table they put me. I learned that there is no amount of paperwork you can fill out, no amount of money you can wire, no amount of niceness you can perform that will make a person love you who has decided you are not worth loving. And I learned that the moment you stop trying to earn a chair at the wrong table is the moment you remember that you already have a chair at the right one, in a small kitchen on Maple Lane, with grocery store flowers in a mason jar and 3 plates set for 3 people who would never, in 1,000 years, look at you and see anything other than their daughter. That is what I learned. That is all I have to say about it. I want to leave you with something I have been thinking about. The night I sat in my office at 2:14 in the morning, dooming, almost sending that email. The woman in the black laptop screen. I think about her sometimes. I think she is still out there in some other version of life, married to Soren, at a holiday dinner at the Albright house, smiling at Mrs. Tilden, stirring gravy with a wooden spoon and pretending she likes it. I do not blame that woman. I understand why she would have sent the email. She was tired. She loved a man. She wanted to belong. She thought belonging was something you could earn if you were just polite enough, patient enough, useful enough. She was wrong. Belonging is not earned. Belonging is recognized. The people who belong to you are the ones who, when you walk in the door bleeding, do not ask you to explain. The people who belong to you are the ones who set 3 plates on a Tuesday, because you needed 3 plates on a Tuesday. The people who belong to you are the ones who, when you tell them you canceled the wedding, ask only one question. What do you want to do? That is the test. That is the only test that has ever mattered. If the people in your life are not asking you that question, if they are asking you instead to make yourself smaller, to pay more, to apologize more, to perform more, to fit the aesthetic, then they are not your people. They are a tax you have been paying on a citizenship you do not actually hold. Stop paying the tax. Go home, whatever home means to you. Maybe it is a small kitchen on Maple Lane. Maybe it is a 1-bedroom apartment with a cat and a window that gets good light. Maybe it is a friend who has been waiting 8 months for you to call her back. Maybe it is just yourself in a robe at 2:14 in the morning with a draft email you have not yet sent. Whatever home is for you, go there. Sit at the table. Eat the French toast. Let the people who already love you, love you. They have been trying to for a long time. I am 33 years old. I am not married. I do not know if I ever will be. I made partner at my firm last spring and 8 months earlier than the standard track, because once I stopped pouring $18,000 and 4 months of attention into the Albright wedding, I had a stunning amount of time and money left over. My father still coaches freshman baseball. My mother still cleans the Methodist church every other Saturday. They are 62 and 63. They are not rich. They are not impressive at first glance. They are the most loved I have ever been. The wooden spoon is in a dumpster somewhere outside Hartford. The drafts folder still has that email in it. The cards from Laurel are in a small wooden box in my closet. The wedding dress, in case you were wondering, was donated to a charity that gives gowns to brides who cannot afford them. I dropped it off on a Saturday morning. The woman behind the counter unzipped the garment bag and gasped. She said, "Honey, this is beautiful." I said, "I know. I hope it makes someone very happy." Then I walked out into the parking lot, and I sat in my car and I did not cry. I just sat there. The sun was coming streaming through the windshield. The radio was playing a song I did not know. My hands on the steering wheel were perfectly steady. I had spent my whole adult life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for me. So I went home, and I built my own. If you have ever made yourself smaller so the people you love could feel bigger, I see you. If you have ever heard yourself described as the bride's people by someone who was supposed to call you family, I see you. If you have ever drafted an apology at 2 in the morning for a thing that was not your fault, and saved it and not sent it, I see you most of all. I want to ask you something before I go. And I want you to be honest about it, because I am still honest about it with myself, and I think honesty is the only thing that gets any of us out of rooms like the one I was in. Here is my question. Would you have gone through with the wedding anyway, for the man you loved? Or canceled it for the family you were marrying into? There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. I want to know what you would have done, because I still wonder on certain quiet nights if I made the right call. Tell me below. I will read everyone. I read them all. Take care of yourselves. Set 3 plates if you only need 3. And if anyone ever tells you, in a sunlit kitchen with peonies between you, that you do not fit the aesthetic, pick up your purse, set down the coffee cup, and go home. Your real family is already setting the table. I'll see you in the next one.